guys. Look, I'm in the bathtub with my Kimber again. This time the extended magazine. Isn't that awesome? Now it holds 10. The California legal limit. Yeah, I know they say there's some trouble with, like, the 10 rounds. Sometimes have trouble feeding, but seemed okay when I, ran them all through, so yeah. So today, the forces that be have suggested that I share with you personal things. Yes, get more comfortable, yes. Nothing like ceramic against bare skin. So, okay, I don't remember how old I was anymore. I was 21. Well, anyway, I was I was working on there used to be this these old style computer games which you could actually program certain things in. So I was programming in a bunch of lewd limericks to say when I aced someone else in the game. I was very proud of myself for those things. I would just come up with these incredible, outlandish statements, and then when I shot someone in the game, I would press a button and it would just say the whole statement for me, so I didn't have to type it out or lose my focus. It was so awesome. Just things to humiliate people some more, but funny, clever things that are, bright in the intellectual standards. It wasn't any worse than what they already did. And so when I was doing this, I was merrily typing in some new ones, and I heard this loud pop, like someone had dropped a phone book on linoleum. And I was like, huh. And so then my mind flashed to how there was this PDR kept in the hallway, the main hallway in our house we were renting, where there was this PDR there, this big fat book, and sometimes someone knocked it off and it fell onto the hardwood floor on one side, or the linoleum on the other side of the divider that it was resting on between the hall and the kitchen, or the hall and the living room. And I thought, oh shoot, someone must have knocked over the PDR again, because we had an actual PDR that we updated yearly because my dad was always sick. So anyway, so I thought, oh geez, someone knocked it over again. And then, my mom comes running down as an L-shaped hallway, but my room was at the end of it. So my mom comes running around the L of the hall, and she just makes a beeline straight toward me. And I want to tell you something, my mom would come running up to me any number of times for any number of reasons, but I never had recalled her ever making this kind of an approach. It was just straight toward me like an arrow or something, whoo. And she said, David, I think you're dad. And that's when I knew, it hit me, that it wasn't the PDR falling. My dad had shot himself. And I was like, holy shit. And I'd always known it might happen because he had this very rare genetic disorder that, he basically self-diagnosed because the doctors simply couldn't identify it. And he actually did all his own medical research and actually came up with the only thing his condition could be, and then told the doctors it must be that, and they refused to run the test that would verify it, saying it was so unlikely that could be the condition that they wouldn't test for it, even when he offered to pay for it himself. So he actually went through 20 doctors, or like most of the private offices in the Los Angeles area, until he found one doctor who, for whatever reason, was willing to run the test, and it came back positive. And so thereafter, he wasn't ever able to get any kind of insurance or any kind of coverage from anyone, because either his condition was pre-existing or his condition was so rare and esoteric no one knew what to do with it. Today, they now have some other, it's called XLP, and actually you can lump together 3 or 4 extremely rare immunological, or, it's been so long. Immunological conditions. I wish there were 5 or 6 congenital ones. He had dysgammaglobulinemia. I learned to spell that before I was 12. Anyway, So now, though, now they recognize, still acknowledge it exists. But back then, there are only 3 doctors at UCLA who were in the immunology department who even acknowledged that it might exist. Talk about slipping between the cracks, huh? Everyone else just thought my dad was a loser. Anyway, so when I was like really young, when I was like between 6 and 8, he sat me down in front of him and said, David, I have a congenital birth defect that was latent most of my life, but is now manifesting in a stronger form, and I'm never going to be a healthy person, and you're never going to know me as someone who's healthy, and this is going to affect the whole rest of our lives, and it's never going to change. And I remember that I started to cry, and he put his arm on my shoulder and said, David, it means so much to me that you at this age care enough to actually cry for me. And then when I was 13, I was watching TV one day, and he came into the room where I was watching TV, because TV was like a novelty at the time, because I actually had my own television for the first time. And he just looked at me and said, David, why shouldn't I kill myself? And you think, oh, wow, that's like, getting really heavy, But no, that's what he actually asked me. I think I was 13. And I just looked at him, and then it really struck me that he was really asking me why he shouldn't kill himself. I mean, he wasn't just being rhetorical. I don't know how, but he meant it. It's like if I didn't have an answer for him, he was going to kill himself. And I can't, it was just a really, like, this unreal thing, because I started trying to come up with all these reasons, and none of them were good enough. I started trying, I love you, or what would we do without you, or I don't know what we would do, I don't know what, how we deal with, like, any, like, problems, or, where would we go, and all these things. And then, like, he went out to where my mother and my stepsister were, and they just hung their heads and never said a word. As far as I can remember. So it was just me constantly pleading with, no, don't do that, because, and he said, well, why shouldn't I? Every day I suffer like hell, and all you guys are shackled by me, and nothing ever goes right, and nothing ever is going to change, and everyone thinks we're a piece of shit. Why shouldn't I kill myself? And I didn't have an answer. And so I was like, I thought about it, I said, well, if that's what you're going to do, then I guess I'm there for you. And I started to cry, but no, I'm there for you, Dad. If that's what you think you have to do, I'm there for you. And he said, oh, fuck it. And then he went into his room and shut the door, and then he never talked about it again for a while. Until, like, now I was 21, and he actually had shot himself. So I went up, and I went past my mom, who was basically not, she wasn't exactly hysterical, but it was clear she didn't feel she had any power in the situation. So I went over to his room. And his room, the door was sort of strange, because, like, about less than 6 months earlier, he got into this fit of rage, and he had taken his H&K carbine, 9mm carbine, which is since illegal. You can't have that anymore. And he couldn't will it to me when he died, or if he wanted to, because it was illegal to even will it to your son or your children after you died. They just confiscated it afterwards. It's funny, but anyway. And so anyway, and he took it, and he took the folding stock on the butt, and he basically smashed a hole through his door that was like the size of a man's chest. And then he had gone around the house and smashed other holes in the wall. And so anyway, as a result, he didn't really have a door. I mean, the door shut, but there was just a poster over it of, like, some nude guy, because he liked that, or something, a Playgirl. So he had a poster of a nude guy, and I was staring at this poster, and that was the only thing, this, like, little thin piece of paper between me and whatever was on the other side of the door. So I'm knocking on it, no, Dad, and I'm not hearing anything. And so there's just, the door is locked, but it's not really locked, because it's just this poster noise. So all I had to do was just push my hand through the poster, and I could see what the fuck was going on, but I didn't really want to see, and it was somehow you just knew it was true, I don't know how to tell you. So now, like, it's basically like I'm alone here. I don't know how to explain it to you. I mean, my mom was there, but she wasn't really there, or I don't know how to explain it. So anyway, So now I have to call 911. So I go to the phone and I pick it up. And these are just landlines back then. There were no cool cell phones or anything. So I pick it up and I dial 911. And there's the operator. Hello. Hi. I think my dad shot himself. Is he all right? No, I think he's dead. Okay, well, we're sending a black and white unit over. And meanwhile, please stay tight and respond. Be there for when the officers respond. Thank you. Click. So about 15 minutes later, black and white pulls up. These two male cops come out, and they come up to the door and they knock and I open it up. They come in. They say, you think your dad shot himself? I said, yeah, he's in that room. I think he shot himself. So they look at each other and they go to the door and they notice it's locked. But they somehow, I don't think without doing anything, with the poster, they somehow would get it open because it was really flimsy anyway. They both go in and they're in there for about a minute. And then they both come out and they shut the door behind them. And I'll never forget what one of the cops said. He said, boy, that man really wanted to die. And, there was nothing really to say that. I'm just standing there, and my mom is sitting on the living room couch and she is just bawling her eyes out. Just bawling her eyes out. So they come up to her to get a statement. They didn't really get a statement from me that I recall. And she's just, going, oh, there was never any choice for him, and now they finally killed him. He was such a genius, and they just let him die, and they didn't care. And they're just going, And they say, well, we called for the coroner, and he'll be, they'll be here in about another hour or two. So then we're all standing around for another hour or two, and then the coroner comes. And they take this stretcher, and they bring it in, and they go in, and I just, I got out there so I didn't have to see. And then they take it out, and as before they leave, the coroner says to me, so listen, there's still quite a mess in there. I'll give you a business card of some people who will come and clean it up, but for the meanwhile, you may not want to let your mother go in. And so he hands me a business card, and then they all leave, and then the house goes back to being quiet. And so, then my mom says, you better call his mother and tell Sally Ann. So, now I have to call up his mother, which is the only extended family we had. So I call her up, and I say, Grandma, I think Dad shot himself. And just this long silence, and they had never had a good relationship, okay? They had a very intimate one, but it was not what most people would call, a healthy, happy-go-lucky relationship. I'm sorry, but... And so she says, I don't believe you. And I wasn't really surprised, because she was like that. I said, well, I know, but it's true, and I really don't know what else to say. He shot himself, and he's dead. She says, I don't believe you. I said, well, I guess I don't know what to tell you. I guess you're going to have to call the police or something, because, this is just nothing else I can tell you about what I'm telling you, and I don't know what that's going to change. Just so this was by now, it was getting pretty late into the night, so the coroner's office wasn't open. So she says, well, when they open tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I'm going to call them, and I'm going to see if this is true or not, because if this is just another one of Jeff's lies, I'm going to get really pissed off. So I hung up with her, and then, I go back to, my mom says, let's just go to sleep, there's nothing else to do. So she goes off to bed, which is in another room for my dad, because my dad was always sick, so no one could really sleep with him. And so then I go, and I remember that, I lay down, I sort of fell asleep, but then, in the middle of that, somewhere in there, I woke up, and I sobbed with, these 3 or 4, really deep, racking, dry sobs, and then I fell back asleep, and that's the only emotion I ever really remember actually demonstrating about the whole event, which I know is, a red flag for all sorts of things. So anyway, then I wake up the next morning to the phone ringing, and of course it's his mother, my grandmother, I guess. And I answer the phone. The first thing she says is, it's your fault, David. It's your fault. I said, what? She says, he shot himself with a gun. You knew he was suicidal, and you didn't take his guns away. It's your fault. You as his son are responsible for his death. And I said, well, I mean, I couldn't, I know that he was in a bad way, but I couldn't take his guns away from him, Grandma, because that would have been saying he wasn't a man, and as his son, I couldn't do something like that. If that was his choice, that was his choice, and I couldn't, wasn't for me to get in the way of that. She says, I'm holding you for the rest of your life. You're going to know it was your fault. And she hung up. So, And then after that, I had to get these dudes who come over, and what they do is they clean up the rooms after people die in grisly circumstances. That's what they do. And these three guys come over, and they have all this special, like, hazmat suit stuff they do, and they were very nice. I mean, I can't tell you how nice and, respectful they were. And they went in there, and they were in there for about 5 hours. Very expensive, by the way. And then they left and said, and they gave their condolences. And then you get to open the door and step into the room, and it's really interesting because they, like, painted over part of the walls, and they had to kick out the mattresses, and they cut a hole in the floor so you can actually see the floorboard. They had to cut, the weighted carpet. But the only time it really came to me is when I was handling some papers, and it was like, one of them was my dad's death certificate, and as I looked through it, it says cause of death 357 to mouth. And that was when it first really hit me that my dad shot himself.